Monica was an unsatisfactory child who was unable to attend college. She is totally not Linda at all. As our family's eldest daughter, I receive severe criticism from my mother at home. My younger sister, Linda, recognizes that she is being commended and smiles confidently and broadly as my father nods in agreement. I work with only a high school degree, yet my sister attends a renowned institution. My sister's efforts have earned her the admiration of my parents. Why do we differ so much? My name is Monica. I am a web designer, and I am 26 years old. Living with my parents, sister, and grandparents, I grew up in a rather remote town. The family really loved my sister, Linda, who is 7 years younger than me. I began to feel more and more ignored as her wishes and ideas were frequently given precedence. The way our parents treated us was never equal. Linda would get pricey presents on her birthday, but since my birthday is around Christmas, everyone usually celebrated together, and I just got one present. In addition, the most of the presents were books and study aids, neither of which I was interested in at the time. My parents were always there to encourage Linda at practices and games when she first started playing soccer. Even though I played tennis in middle school, my parents were unable to attend my final game before I graduated since they had to take Linda someplace. I always felt different from my sister because of the way I lived. I wanted to cry on certain days, but my sister always cheered me up. Linda would respond, "It's not like that," whenever our parents made comparisons between us. Monica is capable of everything and excels at both teaching and learning. "Good job," she remarked after my most recent match, and presented me with a little bouquet of flowers she had chosen in the park. The attitudes of our parents also caused our grandparents to weep. They would advise my parents to protect me and behave differently toward me, but my grandmother died before I finished from high school, and my grandfather died shortly after. My mother didn't seem to enjoy the fact that my sister kept siding with me. My mother gradually started treating Linda the same way she treated me. "If you're going to always side with your sister, you might as well stand outside too," she'd add. My mother started threatening us in this way around the time the snow started to accumulate in the dead of winter. Since I didn't want to get my sister involved in these kinds of situations, I had to tell her, "You don't have to take my side anymore." After a while, Linda stopped standing up for me, and with the help of our parents, focused on her education and athletics, apparently enjoying every day. Our parents told us, "We don't have any savings as a result of our grandparents' successive funerals, and I was forced to abandon my plans to attend college. I really wanted to go to college to study design, but it was not permitted, so my only choice after high school was to get a job straight away. But I had a strong urge to work in design, so I accepted an office position at a tiny design firm a little outside of my hometown. Websites for women's services, such as manicure and hair salons, were developed by the firm. I kept asking to do more because I wanted to learn design, and eventually I was given permission to help the designers. It was challenging at times to work in an office setting while closely observing skilled designers, but it ultimately inspired me more. Studying became my first priority as my desire to become a web designer became greater every day. I no longer visited home very often. My parents would just look down on me if I went home, so I thought it was a nuisance. I engaged myself in studying design whenever I had free time. I took online classes while on vacation to gradually improve my computing abilities. At last, my efforts were rewarded, and I was accepted into the design team. The other designers in the organization saw my excitement and began connecting me to contacts and helpful resources. After 3 years as a fully qualified web designer, I was given projects to work on. I learned that my sister will be taking university admission tests 8 years after I graduated from high school and was making a good living as a web designer. Unexpectedly, she was aiming for a large city's esteemed medical school. Because of her diligence, Linda had always maintained high marks, and her entrance appeared to be all but guaranteed. I wanted to support her in return since I remembered how she had helped me during our early years together. She was admitted to her first-choice medical school a few months later. I gave her a heartfelt congrats and was very delighted for her. Congratulations for being accepted, Linda. You put a lot of effort into studying for the test. I genuinely think you're amazing. Feeling a little ashamed, Linda thanked me but then raised an issue. I have a minor problem. It appears that a gift is advised because it is a private medical institution. Although it's not required, Dad and Mom fear that if they don't help, they will be viewed as impoverished. However, the cost of living and tuition alone is high, so I'm at a loss on what to do. Linda mentioned she planned to cover her living expenses with part-time jobs, but studying in medical school demands immense dedication. I could easily imagine her struggling to keep up with the vast amount of study required. Although I wanted to help with the donation, it was impossible for my father, a white-collar worker, and my mother, who only worked 2 days a week, to afford such expenses. The tuition for a private medical university itself was a substantial burden on the family finances, and it seemed they intended for me to cover the costs. I was surprised that they had asked Linda to request money instead of asking directly themselves. Despite my disdain for my parents' actions, I decided to support my sister and agreed to provide for the donation and other entrance fees. Thus, Linda began living alone in an apartment near the university and started her new life. Her place wasn't too far from mine, so I thought she could rely on me anytime. However, perhaps because she was immersed in her college life, her responses to me were rather curt. Still, I would receive messages like, "I want to eat this," or "I need this, please buy it for me," and I would arrange these things for her, supporting her in ways she couldn't ask from our parents. We sometimes ate together, but even then she was brusque, focusing on her smartphone rather than engaging in conversation with me. No matter what I said, she insisted, "Studying is hard." I started to feel bewildered by such responses. Somehow, Linda had become cold toward me. Even today's meal felt as if I had forced her to come out. Trying to change the mood, I brought up our parents in a cheerful tone. "Mom and Dad probably only care about you, though." Suddenly, Linda stared at me intently and snorted lightly. "Of course, a medical student like me and a high school graduate designer like you are incomparable. No one cares about a job that doesn't require qualifications like yours." Her intense tone made my blood run cold. There's no need to say it like that just because it's a job that doesn't require qualifications. She continued, "That's the truth. Being a designer is just a title, and anyone can make a site if they look it up online. It might be better if you had a qualification, but it might be tough for a high school grad like you to get one." "It's not that simple. I'm studying and working every day," I replied, feeling hurt. Linda glanced at me displeased and clicked her tongue. "Dad and Mom often say that I'm going to a prestigious university and have a promising future, but you didn't even go to college and are a disappointment. I'm only going out to eat with you because our parents told me to. They say, though she's disappointing, make sure Monica doesn't fall any lower. You, the future doctor, should look out for her." Our parents have always compared Linda and me since we were children. Linda is smart, kind, and dependable, while Monica is stupid, clumsy, and can't do anything. Those words, which were directly hurled at me, resurfaced, and I felt like I was suffocating. My head spun, and I could only bow down and endure it. Seeing me like that, Linda mistook my demeanor for crying, gave a slight smile, said, "I'm going home now," and left. Having moved out and gained the freedom of living alone, Linda seemed like a completely different person. Surrounded by exceptional people she never met back home, she must fully believe the praises our parents heap on her every day. If our parents say every day that Linda is undeniably a prodigy and she will definitely become a top-class doctor, it's no wonder Linda believes it without a doubt. Those words included a disdainful attitude toward me, which likely led Linda to naturally adopt the same view toward me. This year-end, as usual, I returned home for the holidays. I was asked to return home with Linda, who always had a cold attitude, so we went back together. Linda had been extremely busy with her studies and practical training, and it seemed she hadn't returned home once since starting university. Perhaps because of that, my parents didn't pay any attention to me and were completely focused on Linda. When we arrived home, the table was filled with treats like steak and pizza to welcome her, and in the evening, neighbors, relatives, and even Linda's local classmates gathered for a big party. Linda seemed pleased with the atmosphere and began boasting loudly. Mom tells me to come home more often, but my university is that prestigious one, and it's the most difficult medical school, so it's obvious that studying is tough. I'm still a student, but we have many team projects, and I can't just leave them to relax at home. Everyone keeps contacting me whenever something happens, and it really troubles me. I pretended to be cooking in the kitchen and quietly slipped away, but I could hear Linda's loud boasting clearly to the parents and relatives. It might have been fine, but to the neighbors and her classmates, Linda's boasting probably sounded unpleasant. Perhaps tired of Linda's solo performance, when I brought over some wine, a neighborly old man tried to change the conversation to me. "Aren't you working in design, Monica?" However, Linda and my parents criticized me in unison. "You can't really talk much about her. She's trying, but exactly, she couldn't even go to college and is such a disappointment. She's completely different from her sister." Among the ones gathered, there were many who hadn't gone to college and were working instead. There were people with families and parents with children, but as they were enjoying the feast, everyone refrained from contradicting my mother's words. Only my parents and Linda seemed completely unaware of the situation. I felt awkward and tried to leave without saying anything. However, Linda stopped me. "You still show your face at home a lot, don't you?" "Monica, I'm doing well in my university studies, so I'm not embarrassed." "Maybe you can be so bold because you don't think about anything." After saying that, I burst out laughing loudly. Our parents also laughed back. "If you say that much, it's surely going to hurt her. That's pitiful." Hearing those words, I immediately felt anger rising. "It seems like it's better if I don't come back next year." I managed to squeeze out those words. Relatives and neighbors looked on with concern, but I put down the tray I was holding and went to get my coat and bag. Linda and the others watched me prepare to leave. I understand everyone's feelings very well. I won't come back to this house anymore. My heart was filled with anger. I felt absolutely nothing towards my sister, just as I did towards my parents. As I said this and left, the three of them waved happily. "Don't come back again." While heading to the station, I desperately suppressed the anger inside me. Returning home always made my heart heavy. When I was aspiring to be a web designer, I could distance myself from my parents by using my studies as a reason. However, as I grew older in my career, I felt it was difficult to easily sever the bond with my parents, and I found myself increasingly troubled. Linda is still a university student and young. It might be difficult for her to understand how hard it is to work in society. Still, I think our parents were trying in their own way to raise their children. Even now, Linda is praised as a genius for her academic abilities, and everyone adopts an attitude of looking down on me. Amidst the childish exchanges, I felt anger and was filled with disappointment. If one takes pride in their work, such a relationship should not continue, even with one's parents. I was appalled by Linda's terrible behavior, but this became the moment I decided to cut ties with my family. Months after making this decision, I unexpectedly received a call from Linda. Afterwards, she persistently sent messages asking me to answer the phone. I wasn't blocking her, so I reluctantly answered. "Did you properly pay my tuition?" Linda's voice, speaking slowly to me, had a hint of urgency. I responded calmly, "I paid the donation and the entrance fee before you enrolled." "What about this year's tuition? The university has urgently requested that it be paid." "I don't know anything about the tuition." Even over the phone, I could sense that Linda was at a loss for words. Indeed, I had drained my savings to provide her with a significant amount of money. I had paid for the entrance fee, donation, and tuition equivalent to 1 year. My savings were almost depleted, and I had planned to pay any further amounts as they came due, so the tuition for the following years remained unpaid. And then there was the incident at the end of the year. It was unbelievable that after telling me not to come home, they would ask me to pay for tuition. I was asked for a donation, right? I paid the other amounts because I wanted to support you. Didn't Mom and Dad send you to an out-of-state private university because they could afford the tuition, or did they send you despite not having the money? That's not it. I have many wealthy friends, so there are other expenses besides living costs. Mom and Dad somehow managed those costs. That's why they don't have money for the tuition, so they told me to contact you. In fact, there was a reason I could afford to support Linda's tuition. It was because I had advanced in my career as a designer by switching to a major design company. My achievements as a designer were recognized, and my salary significantly increased. Furthermore, as I continued to be busy with work, I spent little of my salary in bonuses, allowing my savings to grow. I had discussed my job change with my parents, so they probably counted on my financial support from the beginning to advance Linda's education. Once they realized I could support not just the donation, but also the tuition, it seems the savings intended for her tuition were spent on her leisure activities. Perhaps I was negligent, but I no longer had the heart to forgive them enough to just provide financial support. Assisting with the tuition wasn't a difficult task, but I refused Linda's request. A few days later, I was contacted by my parents, who demanded payment for the tuition, but I refused again. The urgency and accusatory tone in their voices over the phone further sank my spirits. I felt as though I no longer had a place to return to. They were only interested in my money, not in me as part of the family. Being taken for granted without any consultation was something I could not accept. Linda called almost every day. If there had been a sincere apology, maybe I could have been persuaded to forgive her a bit. However, what I actually heard was, "Please pay the tuition. If you don't, I'll be expelled. Scholarships and part-time jobs aren't enough. It would be a waste if a promising student like me were expelled. Right, I'll definitely pay you back once I start working. Please help me as a family." The voicemail was filled with such self-centered words. There were also absurd messages like, "If you're troubled because they told you not to come home, I can try to persuade our parents instead." I saved those messages in a different file and deleted everything from my smartphone. After that, I sent Linda a message and blocked her phone number. No one would want to be treated by someone who only talks down to others just because they are family. This is how I completely cut off communication with my family and was able to welcome a new spring. I heard from one of the relatives that Linda somehow managed to pay for her second year's tuition with scholarships and loans from relatives. However, unable to receive living expense support anymore, Linda started working part-time. But with the immense amount of studying, exams, and practical training, working part-time was harder than she thought, and she ended up dropping units and had to leave university. 6 months later, I had been supporting both her tuition and sending money home, but I stopped the remittances last year. With my financial support gone and living on the edge, my parents now had Linda, who had dropped out of college, back home. Although Linda was academically capable, there was no money at home to consider transferring to another university. Yet she did not work locally, but instead became reclusive, immersing herself in video games daily and lashing out in stress at night. I heard from a friend who lives nearby that the sounds of family arguments are always audible. My parents seemed unable to say anything to the daughter they once doted on. When I met my parents by chance outside, they looked utterly exhausted. It seems that neighbors, perhaps out of awkwardness, hardly spoke to them. One day, perhaps due to stress, my father caused an incident while on his way to work. On the train, he groped a woman next to him and was caught by other passengers and taken away by the police. Fortunately, a settlement was reached and he was not charged, but this incident forced him to resign, as it was already being talked about at his workplace, and he felt uncomfortable staying. My mother had to start working, but having only part-time job experience before, it was difficult for her to find a job that could provide a significant income. My parents occasionally attempted to contact me through family, but their messages were invariably demanding and self-serving. "We'll handle things smoothly here, don't worry," the relatives eventually informed me after growing weary of my parents' rudeness and ceasing to communicate with me. I can now live a stable life as I have completely cut all links to my family's house. Along with my withdrawn sister Linda, I've heard that my jobless father has a bad reputation, and tales have circulated in the community, making them even more of an outsider. Frustrated with the circumstances, my mother seemed to have left. I've now been informed that nobody can contact her. My father and Linda, who are left behind, are unemployed and leading lives that are nearly identical to homelessness. They may have found some warm consolation if they had even a small regard for their neighbors, but there is hardly any assistance from people around them because of their previous behavior. In the design industry, I'm developing my profession with success. I've been chosen to take part in a significant initiative and will be working on tasks that will make my name recognized. This has inspired me to take the university admission tests, something I had wanted to do for a long time. I intend to begin studying for the exam series seriously once I have enough money saved up and the present assignment is over. As I think about becoming self-sufficient in the future, I also intend to get a degree in business management. My pulse is pounding in anticipation of this new task.